it occurred to me that this might be my first actual hobby, where I've always been very passionate about things, but I've always tried to like monetize them in some way, right? Or like turn them into more than just something I do for myself. And this is the first time I'm doing something a lot. Like I'm very into it, and I'm really just, there's no reason. I'm just into it because I'm into it,
Right.
and I'm not trying to monetize it. Like there's no part of this that is, I'm trying to like, commercialize in any way. I'm just doing it because it's fun. And it's really nice. It's really nice having a hobby. I never realized how nice it was to actually have a hobby.
This is the FarmHopLife podcast, a traveling homestead family. I'm Matt DeRosier. On the FarmHopLife podcast, we learn what it takes to grow your own food from everyday people. Could be a college student, grows tomatoes and salad greens on their apartment patio, a former VP of marketing for Del Taco now raising cattle in Montana, or someone who hasn't had a homestead in over 10 years. This show is aimed at teaching you what it takes to make homesteading work for you, that we all make mistakes, we all have bad days, but we can reach out and help one another thrive, and giving you the confidence needed to go feed yourself.
I found you actually through Julie Fredrickson. And so I'm like, oh, who's this guy? And I started looking into you. I'm like, oh, hey, neat. I want him on the podcast.
Yeah. Part of one of the, she was one of our first guests on the podcast. And, we're mutuals. We're in a group chat together and stuff. She's really, really cool person. Incredibly helpful. Like I've never seen someone so gracious with their time.
Really?
Yeah, no, she's incredibly helpful. And also very honest. Like if she doesn't think she can help you, then she's going to be very straight with you out the gate. And I really appreciate both the honesty and the willingness to help. She's a really great person.
One of the first episodes of Doom or Optimism she was on?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think. It might have been like 2 or 3. It was certainly in the first 10.
Wow. Okay. I'll have to go back and check that out. I did not know that.
Yeah, it was. And I don't even really remember how she got on the pod, like how she heard about us or whatever. But I mean, honestly, most of the stuff with Doom or Optimism is just been like kind of miraculous in a way. Like it just sort of, Ashley dreamed up this term and her and Jason started doing that STOA stuff. And it's just sort of, it's been cool, surprising to watch, it just kind of steamroll on. Snowball, not steamroll, snowball.
Right. It can be a steamroll snowball, I guess, at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you met Ashley before or no?
I haven't. Not in person. We've talked, on video calls and stuff.
Yeah.
But I have met Jason in person. I gave him and Dave actually both a tree. That's sort of like my my meeting the mutuals kind of like thing I do is just bring you a fruit tree if I know that you have the property to put a fruit tree in your yard, right?
Right.
But yeah, Dave has a peach tree. I think I gave Jason an apple tree, and then I gave Tom Ruby in Kentucky. I gave him a fig, and then I gave another friend of mine up in New York an apple tree. My goal is to help plant an apple or a fruit tree in every state in the country by the time.
That'd be funny. That'd be great.
I was thinking it'd be a funny like documentary or like a web series or something, like the history of the US in 50 trees, and like use the tree to tell the story of the state or the people or the culture there.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Anyway.
Like, wasn't it like the Homestead? Was it the Homestead Act where like you had to? I guess I've never read it.
Mm-hmm.
Full disclosure, but it was something about like if you planted a tree there, like you started. It was technically like you were producing on it, and like you could claim that plot. So like that's how like Johnny Appleseed just kind of like planted like all these trees like along his way or something like that. And so like there's like so I'm in Western Montana near Missoula,
mm-hmm.
and there's a 120-year-old apple orchard just outside Missoula that people will like they volunteer to stay for a year or more to keep it up as it was back then.
Huh.
And so like stay in the house and they just maintain the orchard and have pigs and all these things. So
Yeah, that's really fascinating.
yeah, it's pretty cool. I've been there once and got a tour. It's a neat place. So
That's really cool. That's really
maybe
cool.
that could be tied into your little 50 states
Yeah.
like trees story or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's like when I have a lot of crazy things I want to do before I die, and I'll probably do 2% of them,
Sure.
But
Yeah. Like I investigated the oh man, I'm gonna butcher the name. I also I forgot the name. The oh man. It's your website that's tied to your Twitter. It's like
Dog Eat Crow.
The what?
Is it Dog Eat Crow?
Yeah, that Twitter handle, but the futuristic writings of it starts with an I.
Is it like Innisfree?
Yes.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. That's another half-assed project. But yeah, I just have a lot of these ideas floating around my head, and I just, I start
all these creative outlets and
and I start them and then I stop and then I'll pick it back up, years later sometimes. I mean, that's how I wrote my first 2 books. I mean, I started them, then they literally sat on the shelf for like 6-7 years, and then I picked them back up, finished them, dusted them off, edited it, and then released it. I used to really feel bad about that when I was younger, but now I've lived long enough to know that like I eventually get to these things. It's almost like it just takes its time. Sometimes I didn't have the life experience I needed to finish it properly at that time, and I started to kind of get off my own back about that and just say like, well, if you're meant to finish it, you'll finish it. If not, it was a thing you did for a while.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Unless you're like me, where you have half your yard torn up and you got a lot of mud everywhere right now.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been completing a set of forest kind of stairs for weeks now. And it's like, it's kind of embarrassing at this point because I'm literally a single step away from being done. But it's just like, it's just, I know what is waiting for me, right? It's just one step, but it's like roots, it's digging through stuff. It's a good hour and a half of work for that one step, basically, or at least 30 minutes. And it won't be very much fun, but I need to get to it before it gets too hot. I mean, down here, because I don't want to be doing that kind of work in 90-degree weather.
Right. And 100% humidity.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your property. You give away fruit trees. Sorry, let's back up one step before that. How did you get started in homesteading, growing fruit trees?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, my story is basically like anyone else's. It's hard to say I have a homestead exactly because I am in the middle of a suburban like neighborhood, but I'm like really very fortunate because, usually, 60s built suburban neighborhoods in the South tend to be highly governed by an HOA or covenants. And there is nothing in my neighborhood. So there's really not there's not much stopping me from doing stuff except for the city. Like if my neighbors complain, the city, if I was doing stuff in the front yard, the city might be kind of like, come on, clean up your yard. But half my yard is a side yard. And so it's technically considered part of my backyard. So I kind of have free reign, but it's actually like where the sidewalk is. So it's like the most public facing part of our yard. It's almost an acre, it's a good size for a suburban lot. And we're at the top of this hill, and it's like the only 2-story building in this immediate part of the neighborhood at the top of a hill. So it kind of has like this kind of like like this sense of grandeur to it that it's the reason why I wanted to buy the house. It really appealed to me. Because when I was growing up, like Georgian houses were always like, oh, that's where the rich people lived, you know?
Right.
So I was like, I love it. Georgian house with crown molding. Like, this is awesome. You know, it's got that kind of 60s charm to it. Yeah, so, you know, it really just started with, you know, I bought this place. My wife and I bought this place 12 years ago. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I started like wanting to grow things. I don't really know where that came from. Like, it was just like, I started to live a more al fresco life, right? I used to sit on our back patio a lot more. I'm from Michigan. So like, I can basically sit outside 9 months out of the year, you know, without being too cold. And so that's kind of what I do. And the more time I spent outside, the more I was like, what else could be done with this place, you know? And then that really like kind of kicked into overdrive with COVID. And I'm sure that you hear that all the time. It seems like, I mean, it was an important period in most everyone's life, you know, in some capacities. Some where it was really bad, some it was really nice, but it definitely feels like it changed most everybody in some capacity. And for me, it was just that I was spending all this time in my house, like looking around and just being like, there's all this possibility around me. I'd always felt really like hemmed in, you know. I always felt like, oh, I'm on this little suburban, you know, plot, and you know, I got to go into the city to do fun things, and it's like I'm so removed and I don't really want to be here. And then just being like stuck here, it like forced me to be kind of rooted. And I was like, wow, this place actually isn't that bad. You know, actually, if I started putting trees here and doing some stuff, it might actually be a really pleasant place. I started, you know, paying attention to the insects and the birds and the you know, when deer would come by, or foxes, or you know, a possum, you know, whatever kind of wildlife that comes out at night. I was like, there's really, you know, I started to see it as a forest. Like, I was like, oh, this could be kind of a forest with the houses interspersed if we just started to use our land differently. And I had this sort of moment, sort of divine inspiration, if you will, where I just kind of had, you know, the voices, or the voice in my head, the kind of constant yattering just stopped. And I heard just make food. So it was like a very like profound moment for me, but it was also very like, it was there and then it was done. And then I was like, did I really just like I'm hearing voices now, you know, like it wasn't like external, like it wasn't an auditory thing. It was just clearly my mind's voice just saying make food very clearly. And I also didn't know what to do with it, because I had been trying for a couple of years and hadn't made anything. Like, I'd grown a couple carrots. Like I was like, oh, I've got a black thumb. I can't do this, you know? So I just started looking, you know, the next day after that, I started looking for places that I could volunteer my time, like act on this in some capacity. And like, I emailed Jamie at Roots Down, and he emailed me right back. And it was like, hey, you know, I don't really need volunteers, but I could use some marketing help. And so, I mean, it was almost an immediate, fast friendship, and now I'm his business partner. And you know, the last 2.5 years, it's been like basically in my personal and private life, I'm basically all wrapped up in growing things and trying to grow more things around Atlanta.
That's awesome. I can't decide if I want to come back to Roots Down or if we want to get into it right now. So I'm going to let you pick if you want to get into Roots Down.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know what would be more interesting to your audience, I guess. I mean, we could talk about what I'm doing here in my property. So, I mean, I'm calling it Old Crow Hill. It's kind of
an awesome name,
because it's not, I mean, it's not a place, but I kind of imagine like that, like if, you know, over time, right? Like if I get old and I'm the crow on the hill, and you know, people are walking around more, and it's maybe a less auto-centric world, you know, maybe a smaller world, you know, we could kind of rename these places, like placify them, if you will. And so that's sort of the long game here, is this kind of, performance art, if you will, to see if I can actually like make this little suburban place into a place that people could kind of talk about, or would have a name. Yeah. So right now it's mostly grass, I mean, it is a suburban,
Sure.
area, but the backyard, I tore up all the grass and built a bunch of beds. It's very, very forested, with a lot of pines and tulip poplars. So in the summer, like only dappled light stuff, like forest stuff, can really survive in about 2/3 of the backyard. So I'm really having to make the most of this corridor of like light that I get in between the patio area and the start of the tree line. But what's interesting is the house already had a greenhouse on it, so I've been using the heck out of that. I had to replace about 6 years ago. I like took all the panes off, cleaned them all, and then re-glued them on, and just like kind of reset the whole thing. I tore everything out, like just kind of rearranged it all to try and make the most out of the space. So I've been using that for like seedlings and plant starts. My goal is kind of like a 50-50. It's like I'm trying to like grow the plant life on the property like as cheaply as possible. So I'm trying to do seed starts of like a bunch of different varieties. I'm really leaning into the pollinator, nature preserve kind of thing more than growing food for, our consumption. Though I'm planting a lot of fruit trees. So I'm trying to like kind of, hedge, right? Make sure that there's some stuff in the ground already, because you can always tear crap up and turn it into an annual garden if I have to. Yeah, so I've just been planting fruit trees, and then I kind of like we have this whole side yard area, which is about like I don't know, like it's probably like 30 square yards. Like it's actually a pretty large area and relatively flat. And I just did this big oval of mulch, around it. So now it's like an oval of grass, and I'm slowly planting the whole thing to be kind of like a secret garden kind of thing, with like make you feel kind of enclosed. And then we can have like picnic tables and stuff and turn that into like kind of a little beer garden for our neighbors and stuff. So I'm kind of like using the plants I grow to just kind of, higgledy-piggledy, just like what will make it. It's like a, like a grudge match, right, with all the plants.
Yeah.
But then the other half, I'm trying to like grow up a little bit taller and then give to my neighbors, things that they, if they want to donate money to the Roots Down Foundation, they can. But I'm growing this stuff anyway. At this point, it's a hobby and I'm obsessed with it. So like I might as well give it away to my neighbors. But what the coolest thing about all of this is that like I've really discovered how many of my neighbors are actually interested in this stuff.
Really?
Like we've been taught that it's something we need to like keep in the backyard. It's just a hobby. I putt around in the garden, but like seeing me doing it in the front yard in sort of a slightly ostentatious fashion, and I'm making my mistakes in public, right? Like, I mean, I'm not a gardener. I'm not like a landscape architect, that's Jamie's side of the business. I'm a marketing guy. So I'm like making these mistakes in public. I've had, half my plants that I planted in the side yard died, or the configuration made zero sense because I had all the tall plants in front and all the little plants in the back, things like that. But just seeing me out there has started so many interesting conversations. And I've really discovered how many of my neighbors are actually very interested in what I'm trying to do here. And, I'm sure there's ones who don't particularly like it, and maybe they just don't talk to me.
If that's all it takes for them to not talk to you, then yeah, you don't need to have a conversation with them anyways.
Yeah, exactly. It's self-selecting, right? Like the ones who are cool will come and hang out, and the ones I don't want to hang out with anyway will stay away. So, yeah. So
these are my politics. Gardening. These are my politics. Gardening.
Yeah. Well, it occurred to me today, this may sound really funny, but it occurred to me that this might be my first actual hobby, where I've always been very passionate about things, but I've always tried to like monetize them in some way, right? Or like turn them into more than just something I do for myself. And this is the first time I'm doing something a lot. Like I'm very into it, and I'm really just, there's no reason. I'm just into it because I'm into it,
Right.
and I'm not trying to monetize it. Like there's no part of this that is, I'm trying to like, commercialize in any way. I'm just doing it because it's fun. And it's really nice. It's really nice having a hobby. I never realized how nice it was to actually have a hobby.
That's kind of funny.
Mhm.
That I suppose, is it because that you're a marketing guy? You're like, oh yeah, if I just, you're trying to not pitch everything because that's more sales, but trying to spit it into a business that just like would take away from the hobby. Is like you're trying to keep your
Yeah,
marketing life and like your what you like to do for fun totally separate. Like stay out
yeah,
of here, marketing.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, this goes way back. I mean, I used to play music a lot, and I was very serious about it from like 16 to about 26, 27. I recorded a bunch of songs. I mean, I was dead serious. I was going to be a rock and roll star, and it killed it for me. Honestly, like when I moved to Nashville and I saw what it really took to make it, right? That talent or yeah, talent really was like 10% of it, right? Most of it is like your ability to network, your ability to do whatever it takes. You have to constantly be like out there and shilling your product, and your product is you, right? And that always, and that, as soon as I realized that's really what the job was, I was like, this sucks. I hate this,
So
and of course,
gross.
there are plenty of people like who do whatever the hell they want, right, in music, and they gather an audience, but that's very few and far between. Usually, if they're not doing the marketing, someone's doing the marketing for that band. You're not just getting an audience organically all by yourself.
Sure.
Maybe that's different with the internet age, but back when I was playing music, like, no, you had to tour, and you had to have the money for tour, and you had to have, you needed to know the people to go on tour with, and you needed to be at the writer showcases, and you needed to write with the right people, and it's all this networking stuff. And I'm not bad mouthing it. That's just the way it's a business. That's how the business works. But I hated it, and it kind of killed music for me. It was just like, I can't do this. And and it being such a part of my personality at the time, right, or my sense of self-worth, it was pretty defeating actually, at the time. But now I've come to realize that, it's just like all these other passions I've had. It was just a thing I did for a while, and it was cool, and I'm really proud of the work I did. But I saw what it took to be a musician. I didn't want to do it. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it just wasn't for you.
yeah, it wasn't for me.
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Do you still play?
Gardening is for me.
Do you still play?
A little bit. I not very often. Now I mostly just like when a song gets like stuck in my head, I have to like learn how to play it. It's just like a thing I have to do.
Work it out of your system. No, I get it.
Exactly. Like, because once you know how a song was recorded, or once you know the song, it eventually loses its mystique, and it becomes part of your background. Now, some of those things, some of those songs remain, the power remains with them. But, and I actually have found that usually the songs that I really, really like and really want to keep liking, I don't learn how to play them. Because it'll kind of kill it for me. But I've been doing some. I started last year doing some of these things called "Old Man in the Greenhouse," and I was playing a cover in the greenhouse. I think I did about 3 or 4 of them. I've got a song now by Jack Van Cleef that I absolutely love called "Rattlesnake." That I'm like, it's in my head. I got to learn how to play this song, and that'll be the next Old Man in the Greenhouse if I ever get around to it.
That's funny. Is that on YouTube, or you just do it for?
It's on YouTube. I mean, it's a one take thing. Like I just plot, I learn how to play it. I plop the phone down, record it in one take, and then upload it.
I'm gonna have to look that up. That sounds funny. So your garden, your greenhouse, you mentioned like the oval part on the side of your house.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard anybody say that they're designing something specifically for community like that. You're like, you said, like a beer garden for you and your neighbors. That's so what kind of like techniques or methods are you like working with that? Are you doing like a layered system like permaculture, or is it just as simple as the gauntlet method, as you say, to just like see what works?
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning as I go along. This year is nice because I really started last year with the side yard there in particular. And I really started too late in the season, so I planted like all of these perennial flowers, native flowers that were all like, most of them were really past their real season, right? They were heading into, some of them had fall blooms, but most of them were like, I only bought 1-gallon plants too, so they weren't very big either. And so it definitely looked a little scrubby last year. Like it was like I lay, and I didn't spring for like real mulch. I used chip drop. So like it was just like pines, right? It was just like a mix of stuff. And so it was kind of like scrubby mulch, which I used to kill the grass. I just mulched it really, 6-7 inches up, and then planted stuff. And so admittedly, like last year, it was a little like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like it looked a little crazy. But this year, all the perennials are coming back, right? And like they're coming back twice as big as they were. And now they're having a whole growing season. So they're like coming back bushy and stuff. And it's kind of like, now I'm like seeing it. I'm like, oh, okay. You weren't that far off. You weren't that far off. What you were seeing in your head wasn't that far off of what is slowly becoming the reality. But like, you buy a 1-gallon blueberry, like it's not going to be big the way you see it for 6 or 7 years. I mean, it's
sure. Yeah.
And so it's just, it's about patience. I mean, this is something that for me is like, as long as I stay in this house, as long as I can move, I will be working on this yard. And it will never be done. And especially, I just planted a fig 2 days ago in the front yard. It's a 3-gallon fig. Like this thing, 4 or 5 years before it's really like big, producing a lot of figs for me, and that's assuming I put it in the right place, which I won't know for a couple of years, really, whether it's in the right place. I think it is. Yeah, it's all just a long experiment for me.
I get analysis paralysis way too bad.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, I could do that here. I don't know. Maybe no, I don't know. And so like I had to have somebody come out and like we did a property walk. He did a evaluation with me. He was here for 2 hours just to like basically talk through a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I could have paid him to come up with a plan to like, draw it all out, pretty pictures, do this, dummy, kind of thing. But I think just the talking through it was enough for me to kind of figure it out. So.
But you're trying to do it for real, right? Like are you trying to live off your land?
Not really.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That sounds nice. I'll let you know when I'm there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be I would have to completely reorganize things to live off of this property. It absolutely could be done, I suppose, to a certain degree. We'd have to some very, very weird rules about common land and cows and pigs and things like that,
right.
or sheep. But if it was just like, I really went for it with permaculture, I think I could probably do something pretty cool with this property. But like I said, I'm mostly into the kind of trying to create, I want as many birds and bugs and just life going on this property. And I'll get by with the fruit, and
right.
And see what I can do with that. Tom Ruby is a good friend of mine up in Kentucky, and he makes like cordials, like liqueurs. And he's got me really thinking. I tried all his liqueurs when I was up there. They were absolutely amazing. And he got me the wheels turning. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to focus on like berries then, and I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can turn them into jams or liqueurs to give away at Christmas, or even maybe like seasonal ones, like come to the beer garden and try the new seasonal liqueur, I think it'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, you kind of asked about I totally dodged the community question, oddly enough. I didn't mean to.
That's fine. I got lost anyways.
Yeah,
with
your answers, circles. So. But yeah, it's very important to me because I believe that. Well, I have this crazy idea that suburbia, if you squint, right, is actually very beautiful. If it's like if we could scrub the car infrastructure right out of there.
Sure.
Like in my neighborhood, it's like if that was a dirt road and people had like the kind of split rail fences and they had gardens in the front yard and stuff, like it basically would be Anne of Green Gables. It'd be a gorgeous place to live. But obviously there are like major policy decisions that need to be made to move in that direction. I personally think that we're going to be, as a society, going to be somewhat dragged kicking and screaming to some sort of future like that anyway. And so I'm sort of prepared to test the limits of it on my own property here. And can I use it to build community? Like, can I, suburbia as it's organized is very alienating, but it doesn't have to be, right? Like, I mean, if we're at the top of a hill, we've got this big flat area on the side where everyone's walking by to go down to different parts of the neighborhood. It's kind of an ideal place for an inn. Like honestly, like if this was, this is where you'd put a corner store if we built neighborhoods like we built them back in the day, right? Our house would be the corner store. It'd be the logical place for a corner store or a pub or something, right? So why not kind of lean into it? Yeah, exactly. And I was like, well, we can always build, maybe build something small, like a small, side building, as well. And depending on how things get, right? If that's kind of stuff is necessary, I don't want to lean into it too much and scare everyone away. But I think there'd be a real opportunity to bring people together, and show like, hey, we can do backyard barbecues again, right? Like we can do block parties. It's not right. We don't have to be scared of each other.
Man, that does sound kind of nice. Why? That is kind of weird that people don't have their gardens in the front yard anymore. I suppose regulations and whatnot, but I'm actually moving my garden from the backyard to the front yard as part of like that property evaluation.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, my house, the unfortunate thing, and this is how you could tell it's a very like modernist way of building, right? Is that they situated it, they basically like determined the road and then situated it according to the road, right? But the house is placed on the southern end of the lot. So my actual southern exposure is really just like a pathway, basically. So all of the land that I'm talking about is all on the north side of the house. But fortunately, like, as the sun is overhead, it does get enough, like 6 hours of sunlight in a pretty solid patch of there. But most of the sunlight is really going to have to be on the west side of the house, which is technically the front of the house. It's beautiful sloping. It'd be like the perfect place for a vineyard, right? Like, cause it's like already sloping and you can kind of see it like a terraced vineyard out front. But I think that might be a bridge too far for my neighbors to do that. But I'm going to slowly kind of like turn it. I already moved like our slate. We have really great slate, big tiles of slate. And I already moved them to the middle of the property. And so the idea is kind of like a trellis and like white picket fence kind of thing. And the whole front yard be a garden, when I say garden, I mean more like Garden of Eden, like more like, or like a botanical garden, less of like a traditional annual garden or row crops, I just want like life everywhere, and that
sounds so nice.
Yeah. I want people to like be able to like walk these little windy paths on my, it's only an acre.
Like,
And
oh, what's over there? Oh,
yeah,
what's
yeah,
over there?
yeah.
Yeah. The curiosity.
Yes, exactly. I want it to be whimsical and just fun, but like not like dorky whimsical or whatever, but like just like nature is whimsical. Like when things are in natural order with each other, there's a power there, and you can tap into it. And I'd like this part of the world to be like that.
Yeah. Like someone picks something up, like you telling me I can eat this? What is this? And you can eat it. Don't eat that one over there, but yeah.
I've been my second social media account of choice is Instagram. I have been getting into this kind of Instagram Reels loop, but there's a funny one that kind of is going around, like the mushroom forager kind of community of just sort of like, think you got wild carrots? Really? Is that what you got? And it's like, no, this thing's going to kill you or make you sick.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Anyway,
I haven't seen those.
Yeah. They're entertaining and also informative because they show you what you shouldn't be foraging. I wouldn't have them in my yard anyway, but.
Right. I've got one of those like plant scanner apps on my phone, and I used it a little bit last year, and I found what the heck is it called? I don't remember. It's a cool looking flower, but it like will kill horses, and so I'm like, holy smokes, what is that even doing here? And it was kind of wild to find that. Just like, I don't even know if I should look at it. Like, is it gonna get me if it can kill a horse?
Yeah. I've been trying to grow castor beans. Castor bean? It's a castor bean, but I don't know if that's the name of the plant. It's what castor oil comes from, right? But apparently it's like a beautiful, like red leaves, almost like a Japanese maple, right?
Okay.
Like these kind of like red puffball flowers. But like literally every part of it will kill you if you eat too much of it. I think maybe it won't kill you, but you'll get very sick. Like you don't want to eat it. You don't want to make a tea out of it.
Right.
If you have the ability, maybe you can crush the beans to make the castor oil, but none of it is like good for you. But it makes a beautiful plant, and I don't have any animals to worry about. So
it's just strictly ornamental.
Yeah, in my case, it'd be strictly ornamental. It's just I don't have like a lot of like because so much of my yard is shaded or is part shade. I just don't have a lot of options for like tall, colorful plants. Right.
Sure.
I'm leaning on like canna lilies might be able to work well in areas. I got an elderflower, and pawpaws. But a lot of those really don't have like a lot of color, so a tall red plant that can do part shade is kind of like a real winner for me.
What about like a purplish bamboo or something?
Mm-hmm. My worry with bamboo is down here is it's so invasive.
Oh,
like once it takes hold, it's game over.
Gotcha.
And so I'm a little worried about bamboo, but the old standby is hydrangea, right? Everyone here has hydrangeas everywhere, and they're beautiful, incredibly easy to grow and take care of plants. They come.
But you just want to be different, and that's fine.
Yeah, and I also have a lot of hydrangea already, so I'm trying not to like. In one of the areas, it's already dominated by this gigantic oak leaf hydrangea that's like was the original owner put in, right? And it's gorgeous. I love it, but it's like I don't want a whole yard.
Yeah, so, I see.
Yeah.
What would you say the biggest challenge is that you face so far in trying to? I know you didn't really say like you're like a homesteader, but you do homestead stuff.
Yeah. No, and I think like it's more just like I would say that that is aspirational for me, right? Like I do like the idea of doing more of my own things. That's why I'm growing the plants from seed, or trying to grow as many from seed as possible, because I really want to do the whole thing, right? I want to know how to do it. I want to build those woodland stairs because I've never done it before, and I want to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
So there's homesteadiness about it, of just being like, I'll say like, I have a much deeper burgeoning connection to this property than the average suburbanite has to their lawn, right? They think of their house. Their property is their house, right? But for me, I'm like looking at the whole thing and saying, okay, well, how much life and how much of me can I inject into this property? Every inch of it, and so I do have a kind of unique perspective on it in that way. And so I think, I'd gladly do more, if it was acceptable. I've joked with my wife that like, if either of the neighbors on either side, like, decide to sell their house, maybe we should buy it and try and like combine it into a bigger lot. I was like, maybe what we could do is slowly buy up all the houses and we'd just own the whole neighborhood, and it'd be like one big village. Yeah, that's one of my dreams for the neighborhood. But yeah, I mean, my relationship to the property is slightly different, and I think that makes it a little bit like homesteading.
Yeah.
But I'm really I'm insecure about it because I know so many people who are like on 6 acres, are actually really trying, and I'm just sort of like, I take my leaf, into town to get my plants at Home Depot. It's like I'm not exactly homesteading, but yeah, I'm really interested in the crafting part of it, and finding new ways to make things and learning how to do things. I never, I don't know. Growing up, I thought like, I needed to do stuff with my brain. That was my highest and best use, and now I'm starting to realize it's a lot of fun to do stuff with your hands too, and like just kind of make things just to make them,
Yeah, sometimes like some of the best things come out of just move, like just start doing stuff with your hands, and you'll figure it out as you go, and you're like, hey, that didn't turn out half bad.
Yeah,
look what I did.
Yeah, and it really, what really can make it fun is if you don't really care how it turns out. If the journey really is more important than the destination, it's just a ton of fun, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter how it turns out. You can always redo it, or just be happy with your slightly uneven forest stairs. It's just like, hey, it was my first shot.
They're rustic now.
I did it myself. Yeah, it's rustic, right? And over time, they're going to settle anyway. Right. I mean, over time, and the goal is to have like dead nettle and other kind of creeping plants kind of like crawling over it and stuff. Right. The goal is to make it seem like ruins, like it's been there for ages.
Right.
And so, all those places that people photograph are never plumb, they're never right. Maybe I'm sure they were when they were originally put in, but part of the charm of it is that they're not quite right. It makes it very individualistic.
Yeah. You're going to have to send me a picture of these forest stairs, because now I'm super curious what they look like.
Well, you've seen them. They're like the classic like 4x4 or 6x6, like, and
like you would almost see on a hiking trail kind of.
Yeah. It's like hiking stairs. Yeah. Like, so it's really just the front and sides of the stair. And then you stake in the next stair to the back of the last stair, and so they end up being about 3x3 stairs. And then I broke some of the slate chips I had, like big ones. I broke them and then put them, and then I planted some like Irish moss and some other kind of.
That's cool.
We call them toe tinglers, right? Like, ideally they'll spread, right? I may have to like year after year kind of add more plant material to keep it, but I'm really kind of hoping it like kind of has this real kind of rustic feel to it. I actually sourced a lot of the wood I use just from like the yard. As I've dug things up, I found like the previous owner, like he was the only owner prior to us. He was an avid gardener too, and he edged everything with like these old. They don't really, well, maybe they do, but they're kind of like oval on one side and then straight on the other. And so all these old like half rotted, like wood beams are everywhere. And so I sort of like used as many of those as I could to make the stairs. So it kind of already has this, weathered look.
Nice. That sounds neat.
Yeah. Although then there are some brand new 4x4s sprinkled in, and, those stairs look crazy because half old weathered wood and brand new wood, but, it'll all look the same eventually.
You're giving me ideas about, I'm doing a kind of like a terrace on the side of my house, like a terraced garden. And I've got a 2-foot rock wall going on. Now I'm not like using mortar to, I actually just bent fencing in like a U shape and then tied the sides together so they wouldn't collapse out or whatever. And then I'm placing them in so that it'll look nice and kind of go up the side of like the side driveway around the house, kind of whatever. Yeah. But now I could plant something near the edge that would kind of like fall over the side of the rocks. Yeah. And then maybe eventually, moss or lichen would start growing on the rocks. But I live in a high and dry climate, so there might not be too much moss. Might take a while.
Yeah. You never know, right? I mean, the funny thing is that if you're open to nature offering you some new ideas, like there's a lot of cool stuff that just pops up. Like, I mean, I've been doing this kind of like half joking like tweet series of like things I found on Old Crow Hill. And they're just like the weeds. I mean, they're weeds. Like there's no way around it. They're just very common native stuff that just landed in my yard somehow. And I'm sort of like, you can stay, like you're not hurting anybody and you look fine. Yeah. And I'm sure there's some native insects that love the shit out of you. And so like, let's let you stay for your season, you'll be gone next year anyway. And if not, then I'll figure out what to do with you because where you're growing right now is not necessarily the ideal place.
That's funny.
But there's like blue mist flowers that grew up like crazy. Here's the funny thing is I had actually gone to a native pollinator, a native pollinator store, right? Which I really like frequenting. They're called Beach Hollow Farms. They're lovely. And I like frequenting them because you can get a lot of interesting plants, right? And I'd seen a blue mist flower and I was like, that's a gorgeous flower. I mean, it like kind of has this, hey, do you know what a blue mist flower looks like?
Not at all.
It's almost a fizzy. Like fizzy is the way I describe it, but it's actually purple. And it's like this kind of like fizzy top, cluster, like tight cluster of flowers. And I was like, it was like $20. And I was like, I've already spent too much. My wife will kill me. I won't get this time. And then like 3 days later, I noticed like this whole patch in my side yard of like tons of blue mist flower had just volunteered on my property.
This is it?
Yeah.
Nice.
And from a distance, like from a little bit away, it just looks, I mean, fizzy is the only way I can think of it. It looks like the evanescence off of a purple soda or something, it's just like, cool. It's a really, really pretty plant. And it's good because it kind of grows in that cool, like kind of 24 to 36 inch area, that is really good for that second tier if you're trying to like tier up the heights of the plants. So I just straight up snagged a couple of them and hung them upside down in the greenhouse and just let them dry through the winter. And then just there's an area where I wanted them. I just sort of like shook it out this spring. So we'll see what happens. It can be a little invasive. So I might have really stepped in it with that, but
you might get that evanescence or that essence thing.
I kind of knew what I was doing. It was an eyes wide open experiment. Like it was an area that I could sacrifice to the blue mist flower if I decide to take over. And I can always till them up, like if I don't like it, I'll just tear them up and put something else there. So
gotcha. That's funny. Yeah. So to circle back to what we were talking about towards the beginning, what is Roots Down?
So Roots Down is essentially we're a consultancy that allows or works with property owners, property managers, HOAs, developers, small local governments to show them how they can turn their landscaping portfolio into a source for environmental and social good. So long and short is that like the landscaping industry is incredibly expensive. It's polluting. It's one of the top 10 most dangerous careers, according to the CDC. It's just like this secret, like it's just, I don't know how it's gotten by for as long as it has, being as gross as it is. Right. And the thing is that fixing it is not hard per se. The question we would always get when we first starting out is like, well, when we convert this over, who's going to maintain it? And my answer was always, well, who's maintaining it now? Right? You're already paying someone to maintain it. Just give them a different skill set and you'll still just pay someone to maintain it. Only now, instead of pumping chemicals into the waterways and using all of the precious water during drought conditions to maintain a lawn that no one uses, it can actually be a wildflower meadow, or it can be a learning garden for the school, or it can just be a beautiful space that's used by nature, by other animals, not humans. And that's really what the movement is about. I mean, it's really just trying to get the biggest landowners that are not agricultural to start thinking about their land differently and showing them the practical steps to get there. So we've created a certification methodology for properties, as well as an intro certification for landscapers to start to retool their skill set to be growers instead of landscapers. Yeah, so that's what Roots Down does. It's been pretty cool to like kind of have so much overlap between my personal interests and what I do for a living. I sort of, even when I'm doing sales calls and stuff, I'm never really selling. I'm just talking about what I love to talk about. And they're either with it or they're not. And, I don't really care. I'll move on to the next call then if they're not interested in it. There's so much opportunity. There's 50 million acres of lawn in this country. 50 million.
Wow.
I mean, to think about in comparison, if we were to turn all of those into orchards, we would increase U.S. Domestic production of fruit by 5 times. Lawn is the single largest irrigated crop in the U.S.
Yes, absolutely.
It's insane. We spend $120 billion a year on landscaping services. It is an astounding amount of money and resources, space, land being devoted to something that really, if we're honest, like most people don't like very much, right? I mean,
right.
A nice lawn with a big house at the end of it looks cool, but it's completely non-functional. No one's ever on it, and it comes with a whole litany of environmental, social, kind of cultural problems. It's very isolating. It's not inviting. It's a ecological dead zone, nothing's growing there. Nothing's living there, except for this one monoculture, So yeah, we're on kind of a mission to turn whatever doesn't need to be used for a football field or a soccer field into something more productive.
No, if you can convert those into something productive,
yeah.
but also be a football field, you'd make it. Yeah, instead of like goalposts, can we just have like some trees and then what's that? Oh man, wasn't there a guy that like I forgot the name? He grows trees and modifies them like by bending them and like making chairs and stuff out of them.
Yeah,
can you do that for the NFL?
You totally could. I was saying like, I was making a joke that like, how much more interesting would all these sports be if they were playing in a wildflower meadow? You know, it would change the whole contour of the game. You know,
Yeah.
Now it's
Or golf.
Yeah,
Golf
exactly.
needs it.
Golf is it's an absolute environmental disaster, but it's a little bit of an uphill climb with this. But the funny thing is it's not as much. Again, COVID, it changed something. Like people are like before COVID, you guys are crazy. After COVID, yeah, I did spend a lot of time outside. I did start to notice like my neighbors' yards and my own yard, and I did spend a lot of time in the local park. And I did enjoy all that hiking I did. And people started to think about the land differently because they couldn't go anywhere. Right, they were stuck just staring at the same pieces of ground, and they started to rethink what might be possible there. And then when they hear the numbers, like it's not even. It's no more expensive to put wildflower meadow in. When you tear up a line to put a new gas line or water line, it's no more expensive to put a wildflower meadow there than it is to put sod. Right. In the end,
Right.
the per square foot cost is roughly the same. And the wildflower meadow you have to mow twice a year. The sod you have to mow every 2 to 4 weeks. So it's like you start looking at it, and it's like it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that we have all these weird interstitial urban spaces devoted to grass that no one uses. But we have to. It's a cost that society has to keep paying for someone to mow this. It's really insane, really, especially when so many cities and counties are struggling with their budgets, that they're spending all this money on useless space is pretty astounding.
Why would you have to trim wildflower meadows twice?
Just usually like in the the winter, like as they're, they can look pretty rough, right? Like, so it depends. You wouldn't have to if
okay.
You're in a neighborhood and people might be like, why does that look so scrubby?
So your flowers start to go like this.
Yeah. And they
trim them up.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them, depending on the mix, can turn brown and, they're dying. Like their season is done and they'll come back next year,
Sure.
But I'm speaking more from a municipal public works department, right? Who's going to have someone calling and complaining every day if that lawn isn't mowed properly, even if it is a wildflower meadow. So, but the costs go way down. There's no watering costs, like the environmental footprint of it is drastically reduced. In all the bad ways and increased in all the good ways.
Right. Yeah. We really want to plant like a bunch of just wildflowers here. Just every color, every shape, whatever, just go crazy. So that's something.
What grows really well in Montana?
Lupine. Lupine grows really well here. It's pretty. We, in certain sections we have, so like in the Bitterroot Valley, there's, the bitterroot flower. That's where the name comes from. And it's like this cool, I actually don't even remember how many petals it has on it, but I found one last year on the property. So that was kind of neat. I actually have cactus on my property, little itty bitty cactus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was also last year, like I was doing a property walk. I'm on just over 2 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And so like my house is like in the middle of like a weird pizza pie kind of shape. And it was kind of just walking around the outside, and I always knew that there was cactus there, but I looked and it had like this nice, like big flower on it. Like, oh, that's so cool. That like, nice. I don't know. I just thought it was most of the time it's just cactus. It sticks to your boots, sticks to your pants, sticks to your hands. Like, didn't know that kind flowered. So
yeah.
Does
it flower every year, or is it like
this was the first year I've noticed it flower. Now I'll have to go back and look at my photos to see when I saw it flower, and see if that happened again this year. But
yeah, isn't that cool though? Isn't it like the not knowing, and just sort of being like, I'll find out next year, like, I mean, I guess you could probably look it up and, but I don't know, that's sort of the start of like a relationship, right? With this
Yeah.
plant. Like, I'm going to know this plant on an individual basis now,
Right.
because I know where it is. I know I'm going to learn more about its habits. And it starts to become, I don't know, more of a person in a way, or a living being that you're sharing this area with, you have a responsibility to that plant, and to wildlife. There's probably all sorts of things that live off of that thing, in some capacity or other.
There was an old barbed wire fence on the property, and almost all of it was fallen down. Barbed wire was like in the dirt and stuff, and so I cleaned a bunch of it up. But there was one post on the property line that was still standing, and there was I think it's a dogwood. Now I don't know for sure, but there's like a younger like kind of dogwood that kind of did like a half wrap around the post, and it flowers for, man, it's only a few days. I think it's like in April or May. I can't remember, but I left it alone. And I actually took a little bit of barbed wire and modified it. So like I kind of brought it around a little bit more so it faces the house. So when it does bloom, like we can see all of it instead of like most of it, I guess. And so that post is just going to stay there forever. Yeah, they're white.
Mm-hmm. They're kind of like four petals.
Honestly, I've never gone up like right to it to like check it out. I just like looking at it from the bedroom window.
Yeah, it sounds like a dogwood.
Yeah.
Dogwood. So like down here in the South, like dogwood is native, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful tree, right? And it's perfect because it's like a mid level tree, right? It's not a very large tree, but it's everywhere down here, like everywhere. Crepe myrtles, dogwood, eastern redbud, like these are like Japanese maple, like these are the trees that everyone chose for color in the 60s, and so they're like everywhere. It's sort of an embarrassment of riches, right, in a way, because it's like they're so ubiquitous that it's kind of like they're not as remarkable. But it does, it makes a real show in March, right? Because you have all the dogwood, all the eastern red buds. You've got the Japanese maples finally starting to push their leaves out and stuff. It ends up being like a really beautiful show for about 2 or 3 weeks. Oh, tulip magnolias as well. I have a tulip magnolia in the backyard, and it's so beautiful for like 4 minutes. I'm always just like, geez, Pete, all of that work, and you last like 4 minutes. Seriously, it's like it blooms, and then we get one storm, and all the blooms are gone.
Yeah.
Which makes a really beautiful carpet of like cream and pink on the ground for a couple of days until it turns brown and becomes mulch.
Right. Yeah, there's so little vegetation on my property that like leafy vegetation.
Yeah,
because I've got lots of sagebrush, and that's cool. I like the sage. It looks good, smells awesome. So like when anything flowers, I'm like, this is great, even if it's just like a simple dogwood. And I'm planting a hedgerow along the I'm above an irrigation ditch, and so like it gets really steep. So I'm planting a series of white and purple flowering locusts, Siberian pea shrub, and Rosa rugosa, kind of doing some sort of like pattern. So all of those will flower and create a nice thick edge.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. That really sounds lovely. Would you be able? Are you able to see it from the house?
Yes.
Okay, right on.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. That sounds really lovely. Yeah, I do have the itch. I feel like I may need to figure out how I can get a larger area, to start to really make a real skunk works. Because this is great. I love my house. I love my property, but when I go to my friends who have more land, I'm like, oh, I could have so much fun out here. You have such a bigger palette and so many more native things, like so many more things just spring up,
Yeah.
You just have much more biodiversity and opportunity to kind of twiddle the knobs and make some things grow and suppress other things. It's maybe someday.
I was gonna say you could I don't know, just get your hands in something, some sort of project, and kind of work on it in tandem with somebody else. So you're not taking on all the work, but yeah, who knows?
Yeah. I'll figure it out someday. It's one of those projects, one of those aspirations. It'll happen if it's going to happen. If not, it wasn't meant to happen. I like to say I want to make sure that I die with a lot of unfinished projects, because that means that, as far as I'm concerned, that means I was living to the minute.
Sure.
I was leaving till the very end because I thought I was going to finish those projects. And so as long as I'm just tooling away at something, I'll be happy.
Yeah. Last question here.
Okay.
What would you tell people that want to get started planting anything?
Start with blueberries. They're so easy to grow, and they grow just about anywhere. Further north you are, it is harder to grow them. But I'm from Michigan, and Michigan grows blueberries like crazy. They're such an easy plant to take care of. They're very hardy. Blueberries are tasty as hell. Not the store-bought crap they're trying to give us now, but like blueberries off the bush are just so tasty. And my youngest son, realized that you can eat the flowers too. And they kind of taste, well, they taste like flowers, but they kind of have this like light blueberry taste to them. They're actually kind of tasty. They're just very small snacks, and then you don't get blueberries. So, I'd rather just wait for the blueberries, but I'd start there. I mean, if you want to get a little more esoteric with it, like, go out and walk whatever property you have regularly, multiple times a day. Get to know every inch if you can, because you do that through the seasons, and you'll start to recognize, just almost by osmosis, you'll start to realize like where the sun is, where the water is, where things are happening, and how the life-giving qualities of your area, like kind of how those patterns move through the seasons. I'll say that's really what happened during COVID for me. And I didn't realize that's what was happening, but I was just there. I was outside, and I would pace a lot because I didn't have much else where to go. Right. Like I was just sort of like, okay. And I found like, A, it calmed me, and B, it was, the more I looked, the more I found. It was just astounding that like you can have a small area, and yet it's always changing. There's always something going on. There's always something moving in or moving out, or coming or going. And I find that endlessly fascinating.
Yeah. Your example of walking the property and understanding the flow of things. That's why I'm having to move the garden to the front yard.
Yes.
Because my raised beds were in the shade of the house for 60% of the day or something. So.
Yeah. And the thing is that like, you don't know that unless you're like paying attention attention over time. Right. That's what's so fascinating for me. No, I guess if you don't have do you have a lot of trees, or is it like mostly like sagebrush and just sort of like under canopy type of stuff?
It's mostly sagebrush and under canopy stuff. Yeah. Like cheatgrass, knapweed, junk like that.
Yeah. Well, because I have such a large established canopy of like pines and tulip poplars. The sun just, it's a very bizarre dance the sun does with the tree canopy and through the year, right? Because, in the winter, right, there's areas that are lasted with winter sun, which for some plants, you can kind of see like they're really rewarded for being able to survive as an evergreen when that canopy's gone, right? All those leaves are gone, and they're just getting blasted with all that sunlight. but yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of variables to start making very interesting, like microclimates, like little pockets,
Yeah.
in 1 acre or half an acre, right? Just the interplay of shadow and light and water, just you can do all sorts of cool things. I mean, you just have to pay attention to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Loved it. Hey man, is there anything that you want to talk about before we wrap up here?
No, I think I think everyone's heard enough from me. If you want to learn more about the work I'm doing, you can of course follow me on Twitter, Dog Eat Crow. I'm also on Instagram as Trace Makes Art. I don't post there very often, but when I do, it really counts. It's really worth it, I suppose. Yeah, that's where you can find me. Roots Down is rootsdownga.com or rootsdowngA on all platforms. So if you're interested in what Roots Down is doing. Other than that, man, thank you so much for having me, Matt.
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate your time and appreciate everyone for listening.
All right.
Have a good night.
I am Matt DeRozier of FarmHopLife. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and visit FarmHopLife.com.
Inside of the city, the people are crazy, out of their minds, they ain't got a clue. We gone away, headed west for Montana, left family and friends, all I got now is you. We both got new jobs, a house and a homestead, thinking this was the life, all that there'd be. After our firstborn, you had to stay home. That's when the work got in the way for me. Well, I started FarmHopLife. We'll come to your farm to help and to wander. Me and the family, a truck and an RV. Send us a message and